All right, it's just got 7:15. You're very welcome along to Friday's OTB AM. We have a stacked show for you this morning. Lots of good stuff coming your way. We've another one of these beauties to give out as well. So stay tuned for details on that very shortly. And it's very much, for all United, Liverpool, City, etc. fans, I do apologise in advance, but very much a Liverpool-themed show for you this morning. The man you can hear giggling away in the background is author, former sports journalist Paul Howard. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks a million for coming in, first of all.
Always happy to come in. I was told we'd just be talking about Liverpool, so yeah.
That's pretty much it, to be honest. There are a few
and the glory days,
bits and pieces, but that is pretty much it. You're unusually sort of, not quite at a loose end, but a small bit of downtime post.
I just finished the next Ross O'Carroll Kelly book, which is coming out in September. Just went to publishers last week, and now I've got about a 4-week gap between now and starting rehearsals for the second run of Copperface Jacks the Musical. So,
right.
So
are you somebody who deals well with? Because I think, having listened to you and read before in terms of your approach to writing, you're pretty structured with it.
I mean, I start very early in the morning. I get up at around 5:30 and start writing then. I think writers, and this was the same when I was a sports journalist, you're either a lark or an owl, and I was a lark. I got up early in the morning and did my best work between, just pre-breakfast and lunchtime, and then for the afternoon, my mind was just wandering,
Wanders on.
But I know other writers who sort of start at 10 o'clock and work through the night. But yeah, so my day is structured, but it's structured sort of towards the start end of
the early part of the day.
Yeah.
Do you deal well with downtime? With I don't have very much to do today, and that's all good?
No, hate it. Absolutely hate it. I'm bored. And that's the thing is, like, especially at the moment, I'm stressed about Liverpool as well, and it's bringing me, being 3 matches away from possibly winning the league title and being 3 matches away from possibly winning the Champions League is just bringing me no happiness whatsoever. Like, no, so I'm not good with downtime. Wednesday when Man United played Man City, I had nothing to do all day, and I was just thinking about the match from the moment I woke up, which was about sort of 5:30, 6 in the morning. Just thought about it all day, and it almost drove me mad. And then when for it to end as disappointingly as it did, with United not really troubling City at all, not making much of a match of it, and then it's just a crushing disappointment, and then you're kind of wishing away the days until the next match.
It followed a fairly classic Liverpool pattern in a lot of ways, that Man City hadn't scored in the first 15 minutes for the first time since 1972 or whatever the stat was, and it looked like United might actually do something, and then suddenly they come out and blitz it. It's a bit torture for a Liverpool fan, I'm presuming, who had invested most part of the day or the week in actually supporting United.
And very, very strange feeling, like, after the Everton match, which I would usually be celebrating Manchester United losing a match 4-0 like that, especially to a team like Everton who never beat anyone really. That you found yourself saying, I really hope they pick themselves up, before the next match.
What can I do to help out?
But but looking at that team, like looking at Pogba and Sanchez when he came on, and Lukaku, and just sort of wanting them to do something, I had this feeling of empathy. Like I knew exactly how it felt to be a Manchester United fan, and I'd much rather be a Liverpool fan at the moment. But
it's in so many ways it should be such an amazing time to be a Liverpool fan, but geez, that result during the week makes it feel as if it's going to be one of the most torturous seasons of all time. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's it's probably, for me, it's like it was for City fans a few years ago before they won the league for the first time in whatever it was. 35, 40 years. When they do it again, after whatever the gap will be, it's 29 years now, it might not be this year, it might be next year or the year after, but there is a sense that things have changed at Liverpool, and that these aren't fleeting successes. We had it under Brendan Rodgers, we had it under Rafa Benitez, where we came close in 2009 and 2014, but they were kind of just transient pieces of hope. I think the sense is now that, especially because Klopp has got the defence sorted out, and that's the bedrock of the team, that we will be in this position again. Like, this isn't a one-off. Like, we're not going to sell all of our good players this summer and start poking around for bargains again. Like, this is the start of something. But you know, until Liverpool do it again. I mean, the last league title Liverpool won, I was 19, like, you know, and I started shaving that day. I was a late shaver.
Normally like a bit of time between drinks, a bit of time between shaves, but
yeah, that was it. And and so you know, I was 19, as a teenager, and now, you know, I'm staring down the barrel of my 50s, and you know, they haven't done it since. But when I was a kid, it just happened so routinely. Liverpool won things, you know, almost as a matter of sort of dull routine. Yeah. And but now, you know, for the last 30 years, it's required a huge amount of emotional commitment to be a Liverpool supporter.
The worrying thing for you is that I'm reading some of the Jurgen Klopp quotes, and we're going to talk to Ray Houghton a bit later in the show, and we'll come to this one specifically with him. But Jurgen Klopp already saying that, listen, no matter what happens this season, we are still around. We are going to be here next season, the year after. It's like, these are the sort of the quotes that should have been coming out post-season, just after Liverpool had either run it right to the wire or had actually won the thing. That
well, I suppose there is a sense that it's out of their hands. You know, there's nothing Liverpool can do about it now. If they win all of the rest of their games, they could
Smack talk Burnley, or, you know, some of these other crap teams that into...
Well, Leicester has been my hope, you know, since Rodgers went there. Leicester has been my great hope, you know.
Don't
worry. You just never know, you know. And so on the 4th of May, Liverpool are playing Newcastle, and Rafa's there, obviously.
Yes.
So and then you've got Rodgers at Leicester the same day. Leicester play City. So you've got two former Liverpool managers who are in a position to affect the outcome of the title. I was talking to somebody recently saying that you know, Rafa still has a home in Liverpool, you know, and Brendan Rodgers has 107 of them, apparently.
Who's to argue with that? And going very well at Leicester is the thing that might actually be some reason for hope.
Yeah, but I think Klopp is clearly trying to transfer the pressure off him and onto City by, you know, tacitly acknowledging that the title is gone. You know, that it's up to City now to lose it. You know, I look at the three remaining fixtures, and you know, Burnley. I was watching Burnley against Chelsea the other night, and they really had a go, and they're good when they have a go. Yeah. And teams that have a go against,
what was it, 8 minutes, and they were Hendrick scored that worldie.
Yeah, they're very un-Hendrick like.
It was off the shin, but listen, let's not mention.
It's like Ronnie Whelan's goal at Euro '88 against Russia. That it looks great until you see it in slow motion.
Slow-mo
from behind the goal. But yeah, I think teams that have had a go at City have had success against them. You know, I think of Spurs in the Champions League. I think of those 3 matches City lost in December, especially the Crystal Palace match. That they're not unbeatable, and they're you know, they're quite weak at the back, like, you know, but I don't know. I mean, I think the question is, at this stage of the season, you always look at the teams they're you know, you're playing, like, what do they have to play for? You know, that there must be when you've got nothing left, when you're not in a relegation fight and you're not in a top 4 fight, you're just sort of mid-table.
You're doing a Bournemouth. Yeah,
when it's the difference between finishing 10th or 9th or, you know, 14th or 15th, what's in it for you? Yeah. And so that would be my fear. You know, I think that that City will probably pick up the 9 points.
Yeah. I think you're
in that case, if that was to happen, I would still think that Liverpool won the league. It's just that Man City won it a little bit better.
Right, we are marking the launch of Liverpool's new 2019-2020 home jersey. It's dedicated to Bob Paisley. You've been reading about this, I'm sure, during the week. We've got a jersey to give away every day this week here on OTB AM. The new kit available to pre-order online at the official LFC store in the Ilex Centre in Dublin ahead of May the 9th, when it'll also be available to purchase in store and online. We have the only actual jersey in Ireland, Paul.
Wow.
In studio right here on OTB AM. This is your last chance to win it. Our audience has been reacting in great numbers, unbelievable numbers. Yeah. Maybe the biggest numbers we've ever had to the opportunity to win this thing.
Right. I might take that. There's a chance it might not be here.
We might keep it at this. We asked you yesterday to tell us who Bob Paisley replaced the Liverpool manager when he took charge of the first team at the end of the 1974 season. The answer, of course, Bill Shankly, who trended worldwide in Dublin yesterday with the landslide of respondents to this one. To win this morning's jersey, we want you to get involved on the show. We want you to send in your list of top 5 Liverpool players to win this beauty. And Paul, you are going to kick things off for us a little bit later with your top 5, and I mean, I know that you would dearly love to. Tommy, let's make sure this is still here when he's gone. So you are going to bring us through your top 5 a little bit later on, but we can reveal one of the names on the list. It's a little bit of controversy about the list, I don't mind saying. There's a little bit of controversy. I know you're having some late doubts, but the graphic's been made, so there's no opportunity to change this thing. They're the rules.
Okay.
John Barnes features, to say. What a wonderful player.
Yeah, John Barnes was amazing. I mean, when I think back on that Liverpool team of the late 1980s, Barnes and Beardsley, Ray Houghton, John Aldridge, they were absolutely brilliant. It's one of the great Liverpool teams of all time. And of course, the sadness when I think back on that team is that they never got to play in a European Cup. Barnes around sort of 88, 89 was probably one of the 3 best players in the world, I would think. That combination, that front 4 or 5 that Liverpool had, they were brilliant. And I would love to see them against that great AC Milan team of the late 80s as well. But because of the ban on English clubs from European competition, they never played, and it is a great sadness about that team. But Barnes was, he was a great goal scorer, but completely, he was the ultimate winger.
His style was so standout from anything else that not anything else we'd ever seen at the time, but it was so standout from so many of the other players or teams at that time. It was like a languid, easy excellence. It almost seemed as if he had an extra half hour on the ball to the players around him. It was that kind of a style. Yeah,
he was, and also, quite apart from what he did as a player, the way he conducted himself. He was the second black player to play for Liverpool after Howard Gale. And, I know football has, football crowds, there's a racism problem among football crowds and has been for years and years. But in the late 80s, it was really, really bad and really pronounced. And Barnes just handled it with and as he still does, there's so much class. And there's a fantastic photograph of him. The fans used to throw bananas at him, and Liverpool played Everton in a match, and there's a beautiful photograph of him backheeling a banana off the pitch after an Everton fan threw it, and it just, that photograph for me is it just
says so much about him as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But he was outstanding. He was, and that the other great thing about Barnes is United could have had him, and Ferguson decided he was going to stick with Jesper Olsen.
Jesus, that was a stinker of a decision.
And that sort of 87 to 90 team. For me, it's my favourite. It's my favourite Liverpool team looking back. They were so exciting. They beat, it was 88 to 90 really. They beat Nottingham Forest 5-0 in a match, and Ray Houghton was playing in it actually. And Tom Finney was at the match, and he said it's the best performance he's ever seen by a team. It was just one of those matches where they just clicked, everything just fell into place, you know. But they were just such a brilliant attacking force, and at the back they had it right as well. They were very solid at the back, and I think they might have been that 87, 88 season. It was the first. They had that silver away strip, which I always remember them by. I think they only lost 2 matches all season, and I think they didn't lose in their first 28 matches or something. So it's kind of, there's comparisons between the current team and that team as well, but the difference is that they were by far and away, they didn't really have a rival, they were so good.
Yeah, well, I mean, there really only is one at the minute as well, I suppose, when you look around it. We'll get into a bit more detail on your top 5. As I said, it's highly controversial, so stay tuned, that coming your way a little bit later. It is 8 o'clock. Delighted to have you along on OTB AM this Friday morning. Here's a bit of a flavour of what's coming up over the next hour and a little bit. Ray Houghton is on the line. We're going to get to him in just a moment's time to preview the season run-in. We're going to let you know what's happening in the back pages of the sports pages today as well. Some interesting stories there. Manchester United, Mo Farah features as well there, and one of the more quirky stories you're going to hear all year, and some new developments and stories in relation to the FAI and its former CEO John Delaney as well that we want to bring you this morning, so that's coming your way at about 8:20 or thereabouts. Paul's going to let us know his Liverpool top 5. That's at 8:30 this morning, so stay tuned for that, and do get in contact with your top 5 as well, because we do have that jersey to give you this morning. We're going to have the sports news at about 9:15. We'll be speaking to Nick Wells, who's a season ticket holder at Saracens, and as a gay man has some interesting stuff to say in relation to the developments there recently, in terms of Billy Vunipola's support of Israel Folau's comments. So that's coming your way just before 9 o'clock. And Terry Hyland as well, ahead of the brand new GA season, will be coming our way at 9:05. So that's roughly what's on the menu for this morning. As I said, the order slightly turned around this morning. We'll get into the sports pages very shortly. But before all of that, Ray Houghton, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you? I know you were listening in there as Paul was talking about the Nottingham Forest 5-0. You've recollections of that game?
Yeah, I mean, it was outstanding performance. We'd actually beat Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup semi-final on the Saturday, and we played them, I think it was on the Tuesday, and we went out and we just played exhilarating football from virtually the first whistle to the last, in complete control. It could have been any scoreline that day, and I just heard there, about the Tom Finney and what he said, and he was right on the day. I mean, it was brilliant football, and just showed you how confident we were at that stage of the season.
Yeah, and we're going through Paul's Liverpool top 5 here in just a little bit. John Barnes is the one that we've given away, features in the list, maybe not surprisingly. I was watching some of his highlights really last night. What a player.
Yeah, I mean, for 3 seasons, John was virtually unplayable. If you look at when he arrived and when I came, I think we finished first in the league, and then 3 seasons. We won the FA Cup in 89, lost it in 88, and we lost in the semi-final in 1990 as well against Crystal Palace when it went the extra time. So we were the dominant team at that stage, and John Barnes was the reason why. He was just a special player. He had everything that you wanted in a player, all his attributes. Quick over the ground, good in the air, could beat players, could go off for his left or his right side. Not only did he score goals, but he assisted in goals as well. He was just a complete all-round player at that stage.
Ray, I mentioned earlier about the great shame, looking back, is that Liverpool team never got to play in the European Cup, the old European Cup. I mean, I would love to have seen you up against that AC Milan team of the late 1980s.
So would we.
Yeah. Do you think about that much? I mean, do you think there were maybe 2 European Cups in that Liverpool team? Yeah,
I certainly felt that we were more than good enough to compete. That's for sure. I mean, there wasn't many around Europe who we were afraid at that stage. But you're quite right. That AC Milan team and who they had at that particular time were phenomenal. And to put your wits against the best and to come out on top was always very special. But not to have that opportunity was tough. No through any fault of any of the players over there, or many of the players over there. It was all new to us, the likes of John Aldridge, John Barnes, Peter Beardsley and myself. We would love to have represented Liverpool in that great competition, because they had a rich history prior to that. And at our prime, not to get the opportunity was very tough, but we understood, that was what was on offer. But it would have been great to play against AC Milan at that stage and see who came out on top. Would have been, I think, the perfect game, to be honest.
Right, given recent developments, we obviously wanted to get your thoughts on where the Premier League title race is at the minute. Has the City win during the week ended it?
Well, I don't think it's ended it, but certainly puts them as favourites. After again going out the Champions League, I think they've really, caught the eye again. With victories over Tottenham and obviously the victory over Manchester United. I know there'll be lots of Liverpool fans listening to your show today, and the one thing that we'll all be hanging on to, and it's only a small thing, is 2 of the games that Manchester City have lost this season are to Newcastle and to Crystal Palace. both of them managed by an ex-Liverpool manager. Now, if you're just going on an omen and you've just got one thing to hang on to, Manchester City have still got to play Leicester, who are managed by an ex-Liverpool manager in Brendan Rodgers. So that's the thing I'm clinging to, and it's as simple as that, because City, I thought, were excellent. I watched the game against Manchester United. I thought they played the game in the right way. For an away team, I thought it was an outstanding away performance, and it just shows you the depth. When they made the change and Fernandinho goes off, Sane comes on, Gundogan goes a little bit deeper, Bernardo Silva comes in field where I think he's better suited to a central role, and then they just dominated and got the goals at the right time. So it's got to be tough. But if Liverpool end up with 97 points, which I think they will, and they don't win the league, I mean, that would be hard to take. I think that could be the third highest, because obviously City will need 98 to beat them, and they got 100 last season, and that'll be the third highest total in the Premier League, and you still don't win it, which will be very tough for Liverpool.
Yeah, it feels almost like City are a slightly different team than they might have been against for some of the previous defeats against those teams. Will it be difficult, Ray, do you think, for like the players, maybe less so Klopp, but not to understand that same dynamic is at place, that ultimately City have 3 games that they really should win? Will it be difficult for those Liverpool players not to buy into that and to sort of focus on their own job at hand?
Well, yeah, listen, you're on the cusp of something special, aren't you? If you're both Manchester City and Liverpool, if Liverpool win the league, it's something not done in the Premier League. They've not won it for the last 29 years, so that would be special for them. They're in the semi-finals of the Champions League against Barcelona, where I still give them a chance of getting through. I think Liverpool's attacking prowess will pose problems for Barcelona defensively. So if they could get through to the final, that back-to-back finals of the Champions League is something that they should be extremely proud of. But City having gone out, of the Champions League, I think they've just really focused on retaining the Premier League, and when that's something that Pep Guardiola would love to do. Is it Jose Mourinho and Sir Alex have actually won back-to-back league titles in the Premier League, and then he could win the domestic treble, if they were to beat Watford in the FA Cup final as well as winning the league. So, it could be a very special year for Manchester City, and if they don't do it, for Liverpool, because of the fact that they would love to win a big trophy. It's something that Jurgen Klopp desperately wants for the football club.
Ray, I'm just looking at the papers this morning. Klopp is talking about how if Liverpool don't win the league this year, don't despair, Liverpool fans, because next year is another year and the year after. We've sort of been here before with Liverpool a few times over the last few years, under in 2009 and 2014 in particular, where they were just right on the verge. But it was just a very, very transient thing. The next year, they sold all their good players. And do you get a sense that it's different this time? That this might actually be the start of a new era for Liverpool, rather than just 1 or 2 good years in which they perform really well and then drift away again?
Well, I think that's a very, very valid point you bring up there about Liverpool in the past when they finished second and didn't push on the following season. That is very, very relevant, and I think that will be uppermost in the minds of the owners at the club and the manager in particular, because you don't want to be known as just a team that came for one season and then the following season you finish 4th or 6th and you're not competitive. I think from Liverpool's point of view, they bought well. I think the manager realised that with the group of players that he had, that he needed top quality in certain areas, and that was a goalkeeper, which he got, and also a centre-back in Virgil van Dijk. But I think if you're going to progress and you're going to be consistent, then you need to bring in even better players. And I think it's down to the owners then to back the manager, give him the money to go out and strengthen the team. I'm sure there'll be areas that he'll have in mind that he has to improve upon if they're going to be consistent next season again. So it comes down to recruitment. If you get that side of it right and you've got the funding to bring in the players that you need, then you can be competitive again. But I think they're a good bunch. What I've seen of them, they got on really well together. I think they all play for each other. There's no big heads there, so you have to deal with that side of it. I think everyone wants to do well for the club. I don't hear any murmurings that anyone wants to leave, whereas maybe in previous seasons, 1 or 2 players were quoted by teams from Barcelona or Real Madrid, and their head was turned by that. I don't see that at the minute. I think the manager's really got the players where he wants them, and long may that continue. But I think they need to win a trophy. I think they just need that first trophy, and that will really set things in motion as far as, trying to get the big prizes on a consistent basis.
It feels almost unthinkable in a lot of ways that Liverpool wouldn't drive on, partly to do with the level of player squad that Klopp is building there, partly to do with the fact that United have fallen away, and it looks like it's going to be some time before they get back. What's happening with Arsenal, nobody knows. You could ask the same question about Chelsea. You expect Tottenham to maybe, what we have done for the last 3 or 4 years, maybe kick on a little bit next year. City are going to be there, but it looks like it might be City and Liverpool again next year, Ray.
Yeah, but the problem with that is recruitment. I'll come back to that again. I mean, Manchester United, where they are at the minute isn't through spending money. Have a look at the money that Van Gaal spent and Jose Mourinho. It's hundreds of millions, but it comes down to bringing the right type of player. You have to make sure you do your due diligence, looking at the players you're bringing in. Can they integrate with the players that you've got? Are they going to improve your team? And make sure you bring in the right kind. And certainly when you look at Alisson and Van Dijk, Robertson, they've brought in the right type, players that can blend into a squad, and really, be part of it, and feel part of it, and want to do well. And that's something you might level against Manchester United. They brought in names, but did they really fit in the system and a style of play? And hasn't quite worked out for them. Whereas Klopp seems to have a good eye for players, but not only that, he's got great man management skills, and he keeps a strong squad. In Liverpool, there's no doubt Liverpool's squad is much stronger than it was last season. Have a look at Champions League final last season, and have a look at Liverpool's bench. You had Chan, who was injured. You had Lallana, who was injured. You didn't have another striker, really, this time around. Have a look at Liverpool when they won at the weekend, and have a look at the difference with the bench that they had. It was a very strong bench when they beat Cardiff. And that's where Liverpool are now. They've got competition for places, as an air of confidence about them. But then you have to add, and you don't have to add by bringing in 6 or 7. They might only be 2 or 3, but they have to be top quality that's going to improve your team for next season.
Is there a bit of rotation tonight with Barcelona in mind, and on the basis that they probably beat Huddersfield one way or the other?
Well, I mean, listen, I was looking at Huddersfield stats. I mean, from the turn of the year, I think they've played 16 games. They've lost 14, they've won 1 and drawn 1. I mean, that's where they're at. They're a side that you really should win against. But Liverpool, I don't think can go into it, just changing the team around. I think they'll be the crux of the team that normally plays. I think the manager will want to keep that consistency, keep that flow of performance. So I think there'll be 1 or 2 changes. I don't see it being a dramatic one. But they have to keep the focus. We haven't seen a change in Huddersfield's performances. Whereas you look at Fulham, who got relegated, and then all of a sudden they relaxed and started to get results. Well, they beat Everton, didn't they? I think they beat Bournemouth. So we've not seen that change from Huddersfield. They're going into games and they look like they're beaten before they started. And Liverpool will be hoping it's that way tonight. But you can only take care of your own. You've got to win your match to put the pressure back on Manchester City. They've got Burnley, I think, this weekend, haven't they? So that's where they're at, Liverpool. They have to win and then revert the pressure back to Manchester City. And you never know. Might be City have an off day, but you can't afford to have an off day yourself. You can't. Although you've got this massive game against Barcelona, you can't think to yourself, I can't make Huddersfield a priority. You've got to win your games and then force the pressure back onto the other side.
Before we wrap up, Ray, with you, we're asking viewers and listeners this morning to send in their top 5 Liverpool players of all time. So to put you on the spot slightly, give us your top 3.
Well, I'll go for Barnsley, Kenny, Stevie G.
In that order?
Well, no, I'm not going to go in any order. I mean, listen, one thing Liverpool have had for I don't know how many years, and I think sometimes you forget about players maybe in the 60s and the 70s, but they've always had hard-working, honest lads, and also true match winners. I mean, ask Roddy Winnie, he'll probably tell you Graham Souness. He was his favourite player when he was at Liverpool. He thought he was absolutely different class. So there's all types, and it's very difficult just to pick 3, 5, 10. They've had that many over the years. But if you were putting me on the spot, they would be the 3 that sort of, it would be, in my mind, who'd done wonderful things for the club. Kenny for his longevity and coming in and changing the club around. I mean, don't forget the contribution of someone like Kevin Keegan and what he did in his time at Liverpool. But there's been lots. You can go through so many of them. They've had so many great players over the years.
Yeah, Ray, thanks a million.
Cheers, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ray Houghton on the line there, previewing the season run in. Some interesting takes there in the top 5 as well.
Yeah, we overlap.
Are you feeling more sort of nervous now about it, or reassured?
Yeah.
Not reassured.
Yeah. Well, I haven't really settled on my type. I mean, you've settled on a graphic. But
yeah, we have.
This is a fluid thing. This
is a dotted line. Is that? It's a dotted line situation. That's fair enough. We are looking for you to send in your top 5 Liverpool players of all time, and we have a lovely prize for you as well. The brand new, only one in Ireland Liverpool jersey for next season as well. So just get up on the Off the Ball social channels. We'll let you know exactly how to enter that up there. So we've plenty more coming for you. The sports page is upcoming, the sports news as well on the way very shortly. But John Jaw has been involved in some heated studio post-match debates over the years, as you'll know. Here's his reaction to Roy Keane's performance on Sky on Wednesday night.
Well, I think you'd have to take the personalities into account in the punditry, because the personalities go into the punditry and they have a view on the game. I think what Roy Keane was saying last night would be absolutely clear to the way Roy Keane thinks about the game. And obviously most players refer to themselves in a certain way, not very loudly, but what Roy Keane was alluding to was the things that he did when he was a player. So I think one of the things that made Keane great was that he was never satisfied with himself, and he was never satisfied with people around him. Now that's the way great players should behave, right? And that was one of his great assets that Keane had. Now when he watches the match last night, he wasn't seeing that, right? He wasn't seeing that. So that was totally against what he believed and made him a great player. Neville, I thought Keane was brilliant last night in his analysis, and actually tore Neville to bits. What Neville was saying, it didn't make sense to me. What he was saying was, in fact, well, the way City play, I think what Keane and Souness, who was another great player, midfield player as well, would know exactly what it was like to be great. And I think they were talking about one of the goals that somebody didn't get back.
Yeah.
Right. Now, that to Keane, when he played, would never happen.
It's more talked about than the game at this stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Post that specific game.
Yeah, and I agree with what John is saying there. I think Roy is obviously from a different era. He's never had to deal with players like Pogba. I mean, I was reading the story recently about how Pogba has this I think it's a Bentley,
right.
and he has a driver. And one of the things that Mourinho was negotiating while he was Man United manager was, would Pogba have to get on the team bus, or could he be chauffeur driven in the Bentley from the team ground? And Mourinho felt that for team spirit, he needed to get on the bus. So the compromise they came to was that he would get on the team bus until a mile from the ground, and then he would switch into the Bentley. So Roy is really he's reminiscing about a time when footballers did what they were told, and now they don't. Now it's a negotiation, and it's not even a negotiation that's conducted with the players face to face. It seems to be done through agents and third parties. So I can kind of understand his frustration watching United's performances and say, how can a manager not get more out of the players? Why do they need to be motivated? But there's so many more voices now. It isn't like Ferguson's time. Can you imagine Alex Ferguson negotiating with a player about how much time he would spend on the team?
I hadn't heard that. That is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
It does feel, I mean, I don't know how many more Pogbas there are out there, right? Like how many other players are going up to the manager and going, listen, I might just find my own way to the ground today. And actually, one day we might look back and say that the worst thing that ever happened to Pogba was that he won a World Cup at such a young age, because it seems to have destroyed him. I know he had those tendencies. People who look at him experienced pros like Roy Keane look at him and say, that's a player playing for himself. That's not a player who feels like he's part of a team. He's almost like trying to, when you see him play, it's almost like he's thinking about what this move is going to look like as a 7-second vine. But I totally get that, and I understand that, and I actually do think that a lot of modern football is heading in that direction. So the manager's challenge then is to say, right, that's what motivates that guy. How do I get him to be the best player he can be?
Yeah.
Right? And that's where I think that maybe somebody like, Mourinho, I'm kind of surprised wouldn't understand that, given the level of Galactico that he would have dealt with over his career. I understand why Roy Keane doesn't get it, because he just steps in and goes, well, I don't understand what you're doing here. You should just want to be the best player for this team. And if you're not, then
I wonder, did Mourinho deal well with Galacticos? I mean, I suppose, did he have many Galacticos at Porto, at Inter Milan, in his first spell at Chelsea? I thought, he had a lot of good pros. He had a lot of players who had failed at other clubs, especially when he was at Inter Milan, who were looking on this as their second chance, and he helped motivate those players and bring them to new heights.
That's a good point.
I think when he was at Real Madrid, he really struggled to handle the Galacticos there, and he publicly rowed with Cristiano Ronaldo. His second spell at Chelsea, when it was clear he'd lost the dressing room. We've seen what happens at Chelsea when players decide not to play for a manager anymore. That had clearly happened at Chelsea, and it happened when he was at Man United. And I think that bounce that Solskjaer benefited from was just purely down to players who had decided, we're not going to play for this manager, let's give this one a go. And have now, when I look at United against Everton, and actually, when I looked at them against City, they just look like a team who are already on their holidays. They've nothing left to play for, really. They have top four to play for, but it's almost like there's a lot of players there who aren't going to be there next season, so they don't really have that to play for.
It's a really interesting point. It's not everybody like a Frank Lampard, when he's not sure what level his career is going to get to, and that story about him chasing him into the shower and he's standing there in the nip doing his thing, and Mourinho's like, you're going to be one of the best midfielders on the planet. And Lampard's like, okay, so that's where his...
But if you arrive at a club and you're already one of the best midfielders of the planet, what can a manager
chasing
do
you into the shower at that point is just a bit weird.
What can Solskjaer do for Pogba? What can Solskjaer tell Pogba at this stage of his career? He's won a World Cup.
One last point on it was that Phil Egan in the office made a very good point during the week that Keane was hugely entertaining during the week. Not especially complex in terms of his analysis, hugely entertaining, but we couldn't be looking at it every week. Like, it's give us a 3 times a season job.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we could stomach that level of ire when Brighton are playing Huddersfield.
Yeah, it kind of annoyed me actually during the European Championships, during the World Cup last year, to see him as the kind of straight man to Ian Wright. They were kind of almost setting him up as, playing him for an idiot, and that's not the best use of Roy Keane. I think the best use of him, as you say, is 5 or 6 times a year, push him in there to tell the truth. And he was telling the truth. This is, and it gives me no pleasure as a Liverpool fan to say it, this is a terrible team.
I suspect that might not be the truth. 23 minutes past 8 on OTB AM this Friday morning. As you've been hearing, Paul Howard in studio with us for the morning, and plenty more still to come. It is time now for the sports pages. We're going to kick things off with the Irish Daily Mail, one of the most interesting stories of the morning, an exclusive by Chris Wheeler here. Ole inquest. Woodward hauls boss in after United's miserable run. It's certainly a bit of a sensational line in the way it's positioned here, Paul. Manchester United chief Ed Woodward held crisis talks with the manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and his assistant Mike Phelan at the club's training ground yesterday. You do wonder if it was crisis talks or it was quite a simple sort of, listen, things haven't been going exactly our way, in the way that any CEO or MD might call in a line manager to say, well, look at...
Yeah, I mean... It's kind of unusual that he would call him in for crisis talk so soon after appointing him, because if Woodward believed he was the right man for the job 6 weeks ago, then he's still the right man now. I think maybe Woodward is the one who's feeling the pressure because, I think this is I think they made a mistake. I think they've appointed the wrong man for the right reasons.
Right.
And I think they went too quickly. They didn't need to appoint him so quickly. But it was just the emotion of the PSG game, in which United actually didn't play very well at all, but they got a result. They gave him the job, and I wonder, is Woodward feeling the heat of that now, that decision?
UEFA keep quiet over Delaney under 17 finals role is the other line, writes Philip Quinn there in the Mail. You're going to kick us off with the Times Ireland edition.
Yeah, the Times, really good piece today, 2 pieces actually, John Fallon and Paul Rowan writing about this. It's all about Delaney's role. So he's on gardening leave. He's almost like he's a self-suspended vice president or executive vice president, whatever the role was in the FAI. And now the under-17 championships are on, and nobody really knows what his role is going to be. And I think this is a championship that Delaney would have been, quite involved in delivering to Ireland. So it's, there's an element of sort of vanity project about it as well. But whose blazer is he going to be wearing? That's the question here. And of course, I'm sort of living for the Sunday Times every week now. Mark Tighe's revelations about what's been happening in the FAI under Delaney, and it's just hard to see how he can continue. But he's hanging on like week after week, and also John Fallon has a really interesting story this morning about this olive branch.
We might come back to that because there's a good bit of detail in it that we do want to come back to in a little bit. There's some other interesting stuff about Mo Farah that's also worth coming back to. We'll do that in a few minutes' time. The Mir we want to mention as well. Playing in Italy is my dream. Romelu Lukaku has had his say on his future. He wants out of United, and Destiny's Chilled is possibly the headline of the morning. Relaxed Klopp insists the title race is far from over and believes that fate may favour Reds in the end. That's the Mirror this morning. You've got the Sun, Paul.
Yeah, the Sun. Pogba is leaving. United players think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer can't handle Paul Pogba. There's no great surprise in that. I read just on the Pogba story, there's a quote in, I think, The Independent this morning, where Pogba says, I think the story says that Pogba is thinking of leaving because he's alarmed at how standards have fallen at Manchester United, which I think is written in nothing to do with me. I was saying earlier, it's like Basil Fawlty, when people complain to him about Manuel, like he would always say, you think you only have to eat here. We have to actually live with this guy.
Think about us for the rest of the week. The Irish Examiner, meanwhile, is also to do with the title race here. The pretty cool graphic there. It's like Highlander. Pep Guardiola versus Jurgen Klopp. Only one of us will be there at the end. That's in relation to the title race. And the thoughts of Ronan O'Gara on Munster inside the Irish Examiner as well.
Yeah, and this is the Independent. Their back page is again UEFA silence on Delaney role in under-17 competition. Danny McDonnell has a piece. Again, asking questions about what is he actually going to be doing at the matches.
They have asked UEFA, Dan McDonnell has asked UEFA, and he hasn't got any reply just yet. The Irish Daily Star, better fate than never. Smiling Jurgen Klopp here is pretty relaxed. Destiny can still hand us the crown, says Klopp, writes Chris McKenna there. Kieran Donaghy, Dubs may have some regrets as the pressure mounts on the 5 in a row chasing Dubs. That's the Star.
And the Guardian back page, it's again a smiling Jurgen Klopp. It's great to see a smiling Jurgen Klopp.
Happy to be here.
And they've gone with the Highlander line again. Only one of us will be there at the end, but he hasn't given up and says Burnley may test City's resolve.
Klopp insists title race is far from over, writes Andy Hunter in the Times, the Irish Times. Bernardo Principal guides City's dominance in Manchester, the most overrated, underrated player in the Premier League, maybe. Bernardo Silva there, reflections on him for Barney Ronay. And City show how vast the gulf has become with United, writes Paul Wilson. That's the Irish Times. The Herald, Reds won't splash out. Klopp vows to stick with the current squad. This is in relation to some of that conversation we've been having a little bit earlier about where to now from a Liverpool point of view. And the last one from me is the Telegraph, and the main story that we're going to focus on here is revealed the story behind Farah feud. Gabor Selassie says row over British runner's controversial coach sparked this 2-year grudge. So that's the Daily Telegraph, and there are some interesting stories that we wanted to come back to. The United one we might start with, reports that in various newspapers, the Lukaku one we mentioned a few minutes ago, that he wants to go to Italy. It seems like there might have been some contact already. It's not just something that's kind of suddenly struck him that Italian life is something for him. But Jeremy Cross, Romelu Lukaku's dropped the biggest hint yet that he could quit United, admitted that he will be tempted by a move to Italy, fueling speculation about a summer exit from Old Trafford. Playing in Serie A is a dream. It would really be a dream.
Yeah. I don't know. He's ready for Italy. I don't know if Italy are ready for Romelu Lukaku. It is amazing. A lot of these stories are generated by agents, and that seems to me to be a story that's generated by an agent. I don't know who. Maybe 20 years ago, your dream might have been to leave England to go and play in Italy. I don't think that's anyone's dream now. You know, it might be his dream because he's failed at Manchester United, but he's playing for what we're always told is the biggest club in the world. Why would he dream of going to play in Italy? I've been to matches in Italy in the last couple of years, and Serie A isn't what it was. You know, I went to a Champions League match in Rome against Atletico Madrid a couple of years ago, and they were selling cheap tickets on the street, and I bought half-price ticket, and my wife was with me, and her ticket was half of my price.
Right, wow.
It was a price for
and
them.
they're cheap to begin with, aren't they?
Yeah, they were. I mean, I think it was about €15. Right. We got into this to see a Champions League match between Rome and Atletico Madrid.
Sorry, were you saying it was a reduced price for women?
Yeah. It was Mary's ticket was half of my price. So I think I paid €15, and Mary's was $7.50. And they were sold through official channels, but it felt like you were buying it from a tout. Like if somebody just wandered up to us in the street wearing a Roma strip and said, "Do you want to buy some tickets to a football match?" And I said, "What's the match?" And they said it was the Champions League match. I said, "Surely this isn't how." I
mean, it's only going to cost me $22.50, but I mean, wow.
I saw I saw Inter Milan and AC Milan in the San Siro 26 years ago, and it was full, and you know, that was Italian football to me. That was the glory. You know, it's around 91, 92. It's the glory era for Italian football, but it's not anymore. You know, and you know, Lukaku saying it's always been his dream to go and play in Italy is an indicator of where he is in his head, and where a lot of those United players are in their heads. They want to move away from a club where they have been part of the problem. You know, they've caused this slump in standards, and now they want away, and they just want to go to a club where life will be a little bit easier and the money is good. Yeah,
and one of those clubs from a Pogba point of view seems like Real Madrid. I mean, again, who the hell knows whether any of this is actually real or not, but he wants to go to Real Madrid. Does Zidane want him, given the quality he has? Remains to be seen. But good question by Oliver Kane, The Times, this morning, about which top class club is going to buy a lot of these players. And actually, when you break it down, he's done a list of the players. Some of the names that jumped up for me, like misfits, I think he calls them. But in terms of, it's a good way of looking at it. It sort of slightly flips it, that McTominay, Darmian, Lindelof, Valencia, Young, Lingard, Jones, Smalling, Fred, Lukaku, Mata, Shaw, Sanchez.
Yeah.
What
you can only see them going. I mean, McTominay, if I was a United fan, I'd be disappointed if they didn't keep him.
Yeah. And he's the one from that list, to be fair, that might actually sort of go on to...
Yeah, and he's a great attitude, and he you know, often when he plays, he is United's man of the match. Rashford, I'd be surprised if he doesn't play, but that's the unusual position the United find themselves in now, that just about every player at the club is potentially up for sale. There isn't any player among that you'd be desperate to keep. And a couple of years ago, you would have said it was David De Gea. I mean, David De Gea, there was one or two seasons ago, David De Gea was the difference between United being top four and United being mid-table. You know, he probably got them, you know, 15, 20 points more than they should have had. And you know, now he's sort of almost in Karius territory. You know, the only difference between him and Karius at the moment is he hasn't done it in a Champions League final. He's done it in a quarter-final. He's done it in a couple of league games, but he's thrown them in. You know, it's really hard to fathom the change that's come over him in the last couple of years, and you can only think it's maybe career disappointment. You know, that if that fax had gone through that time when he was potentially moving to Real Madrid, and there was this fax they were waiting for that didn't come through, his life might have been different. It's almost like he's looking at it as a sort of sliding doors thing now, that he's saying, I could have been there, and look where I am.
The state of me now, yeah. The other difference with Karius is that he obviously has a bank of being discussed as one of the best goalkeepers in the world behind him, so that will give him a bit more leeway, clearly, in terms of...
Yeah, but you build up this goodwill, but I think goalkeepers... when they lose it seems because it's such a confidence thing, and the next thing you're dropped, and it's very difficult to get back when you're dropped as a goalkeeper. You know, you can wait a whole season. I mean, I keep looking at Simon Mignolet on the bench for Liverpool, just watching this great team that he was once part of. I think, will he ever figure again?
You look at great goalkeepers like Joe Hart.
And when he lost it,
some of the greats of the game.
Yeah, Mervyn Day, going back to the 70s, the West Ham goalkeeper. When it went, it went. And it's almost like a boxer's chin. Once it's been exposed, it's there and everybody knows about it. But I do wonder about De Gea, because you'd kind of think, where's the buyer for him? Who's going to come in for him?
John Delaney was one of the other points that we wanted to come back to. It does feature in a lot of the newspapers this morning. Philip Quinn is the one that's in front of me here. UEFA keeping quiet over Delaney under 17 finals role today. Kick off in Dublin this day next week. He's the chairman of the UEFA Youth and Amateur Football Committee, and so by the nature of that role, clearly would be expected to turn up to some of these games. Now, he's on gardening leave. The executive vice president is on gardening leave from the FAI and not entitled to turn up to any official duties. So whether that includes UEFA duties or not remains to be seen, actually, which I was just taken slightly by surprise with today, that doesn't yet been any utterances from UEFA. They have been asked, they haven't made any comment on it, but surely they've got surely somewhere they must have some sort of a protocol about gardening leave from your association results in this.
I wouldn't be thinking so much of the protocol as why would John Delaney want to be there? I know we're used in this country to have politicians with brass necks and sports administrators with brass necks, people like Pat Hickey. But what's in it for John Delaney being there? If you know that everybody, there's a potential for fans to be booing him, for Delaney out signs being held up again. He's going to be walking around shaking hands with people who have quite likely seen his performance in front of the Oireachtas committee, who've read the stories that the Sunday Times have been breaking. Why would you want to be? Isn't there 1,000? I mean, he's talking about gardening leave. Wouldn't you rather be gardening? Wouldn't you rather be anywhere in the world than in a football stadium? I don't understand it. I mean, he's got to have huge self-belief if he thinks he's going to come back from this. Like, if he thinks that in 5 years' time he'll be looking back on this as just a blip in his career and he'll still be sitting in the FAI behind a desk, I don't think the politicians are going to allow that to happen. I think Delaney is dead in the water. Why he would put himself in a position where he's sort of standing in a ground like this, like watching football. I mean, I can't understand that mentality.
And I mean, I think that's why you and I are not the CEO of leading sporting organisations. That I think that there will be an element of ego, that this is a mini tour de force, that I've secured this tournament for this country, and I ought to be there, I deserve to be there, and I will be there. And
if he takes that with him into retirement, like if that, he's only young, he's only 51, I mean, he's got a lot of years left, but I think if he's forced out of the FAI, he won't be leaving saying, well, at least I was there for the under-17 tournament. I mean, that won't be part of the narrative, And it's kind of hard. I mean, I look at John Delaney. I knew John reasonably well in around sort of 2001, 2002, when I was a sports writer with the Sunday Tribune, and John looked like he was the coming man in sports administration. I mean, he was fantastic. I mean, he spoke sense on the Aircon Park issue. He had all the figures worked out. He showed that this was not feasible. The FAI building a stadium of their own in West Dublin was not feasible, and the sensible thing was to go in with the IRFU and to have a stadium within walking distance of Dublin city centre. The Saipan issue, when Brendan Menton, I think wasn't really a strong voice during that time during Saipan, and John Delaney stepped forward and did prime time and did the 6-1 news, did all those things. Yeah. And you looked at him and you thought, this guy, he was only in his late 20s or maybe early 30s, and you looked at him and you thought, this guy's special. So to see him, I mean, I haven't seen John for years and years, but to see him now become that guy, the huge salary, the six-figure salary, and they say you have to pay these big salaries if you want to get the best people, but unfortunately for the FAI, they don't get the best people. Even they just pay the big salary. to see him, having all of his bills paid by the FAI, to see him sitting in front of an Oireachtas committee, refusing to answer questions, essentially pushing this young guy forward to answer questions for him, a guy who's been there for a few weeks.
2 weeks, I think, yeah.
And to see how nervous he was, under this enormous public scrutiny, and Delaney sitting there silently. And then when the question was asked, who's that guy sitting behind you? And somebody answers for Delaney, it's his legal advisor, and no name is offered. I mean, this stuff, you couldn't have believed it of Delaney 17 or 18 years ago. And it's sad to see that he's just become that figure, he's just been, when I look at him, I just think, what a disappointment,
Yeah. And there's time to play out in the jet as well. It's, as you say, the Sunday Times obviously every week has something new and some developments there as well. One development I did want to touch on that story before we leave it was from John Fallon in the Times Ireland edition this morning, writes about an approach from the FAI to Brian Kerr and to Des Casey that a call has been put in. They'd like them to appear at some games. Brian Kerr has some interesting things to say about it.
I mean, it's a sad. I mean, it's one of the sad things about Irish football. It happens in rugby as well, that you've got people like Eddie O'Sullivan and
just Declan
the Kidney. That once you get to the top is seen as becoming the manager of the national team, and then once you've done that and you've failed at that at the end, you've nothing left to contribute. And that was the case with Kerr. I mean, Kerr, the FAI should have found a role for Kerr after he stopped being Ireland manager, but I know there was a personality clash between Delaney and Kerr. They weren't fans of each other, but Kerr was pushed out, ostracised. And I think from this story, it says that he lost his tickets to international matches.
Yes, he did.
That's a terrible thing. I mean, this is a man who brought Ireland great success at underage level, who's one of the best football brains in the country, and he has to buy tickets like I have to buy tickets. I mean, that's terrible. But there's clearly some effort to get him and Des Casey. I mean, I haven't been aware of Des Casey for a few years, but they're clearly trying to get sort of some of the old faces back on side. And I think probably having Brian Kerr's face in the crowd at the under-17s would be a smart thing to do for the FAI, because it looks like this new era they're talking about has Kerr's imprimatur. So that's clearly what they are, and very, very smartly Brian Kerr put the phone down on them, presumably after telling them exactly what he thought of it.
The other story that we'll just touch on, because we do want to get to your Liverpool top 5, which I think is where we're going next, Tommy, if I'm right. Now we're going to Phil after this. Mo Farah and Haile Gebrselassie, this is a story that's sort of run on bizarrely for a few days. Haile Gebrselassie saying that two legends of the athletics game, clearly, saying that Farah holds a grudge over him because he had denied access to one of his own hotels in Ethiopia for a guy who, it was said, coached Farah, although I think he denies it, in Ethiopia. This was 2016. Jema Aiden is the coach, still under a police investigation for some dealings with drugs somewhere along the line, and a drug sting. So it was disputed whether he worked with Farah or not. Worth pointing that out. Haile Gebrselassie also accused Farah of assaulting a couple at a training gym. There's all sorts of interesting little nuance about it. The Farah had and his entourage, which by all accounts seems like it's pretty exceptional, and
Jay-Z or something,
Jay-Z and large. He'd assumed, or one of his entourage had assumed, that the couple were, from my understanding of shooting his training techniques, and it turned out they were just looking at some other training techniques on YouTube, or at least that was their case. He took exception, got into a little bit of a barney. It seems like the wife of the couple got tangled up in it somehow, so there was an allegation that he'd hit a woman, obviously. He doesn't deny, I don't think, hitting the guy in this. He seems to have kicked him in the head by all accounts.
Right.
And as it turns out, the guy was like, look, it took us a few days, we got a bit of mediation and we sorted it out and everything's fine. I actually really like Mo Farah, he's a lovely guy, is what's happened there.
It's amazing. It is an amazing story.
And Farah, the other key point to it, Farah says that he had a watch, 2 phones and about $2.5 grand stolen from one of Haile Selassie's hotels in Ethiopia.
And there was some part of the story where they had mediation. I think their solicitors were talking about Gebrselasie's hotel reimbursing him for what he'd lost. And then after this incident happened, I think Gebrselassie said, well, we tell our guests not to have more than 300 dollars worth of gear in their room.
Yeah.
I think you're insured up to a certain point.
Good advice.
And then it should have been in the hotel safe.
Which they had offered him.
Yeah, but he'd turned it down.
Change.
I mean, there's clearly something going on, but the paranoia, I think, is that's what this is a story about to me. You know, the Mo Farah's paranoia. I mean, he is without doubt probably certainly Britain's most questioned athletics star. And not without, not without reason.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that nobody he's still sort of denying that he worked with certain coaches and this kind of thing. It's all very clandestine athletics. You know, it's like cycling that, you have you have coaches and then you have alleged coaches as well. And it's a very paranoid world, and I can understand how moving in that world he would see somebody holding up an iPhone thinking this guy's going to put my training techniques online.
What was he doing, by the way?
But it's all about the paranoia of it. It isn't like the old days where 30 or 40 years ago, you went out and did a pretty standard training regime. There's so much stuff that athletes do that we don't know about.
We do want to know about it.
Yeah.
Right, there's loads of brilliant quotes. We'll be here until 10 o'clock this morning to read out, but we're checking out some of the papers this morning. That's where we're going to leave the papers for this Friday morning. We do have a very special Saturday panel coming your way. I should remind you of it this week. It'll be Richie Oakley, editor of the Ireland edition of the Times newspaper. Verona Murphy is president of the Irish Road Haulage Association. And Chen Coleman, who's the presenter of News Talk Breakfast, all with thanks to WeLoveCycling.ie, who are powered by Skoda. We're going to be discussing recreational cycling, the rise in popularity, the safety issues, and the pros and cons of getting out and about on two wheels. Saturday panel, Off the Ball News Talk from 1:30 on Saturday. Are you a cyclist?
No, I haven't been on a bike since 1989, and I slipped on gravel.
So that's me done.
That was it. Never again.
It is. I cycle a lot of days of the week in around Dublin city centre, and I frequently in my head sort of play out the scenario where I get killed, and it's like, something is. I've said something about cycling at some point along the line, or there's some sort of a reference point to. Oh, he did say at one point that it was a bit of a dodgy exercise. It's like you really are taking your life into your hands. Yeah,
I mean, look, there's bad motorists and there's bad cyclists and there's bad pedestrians. Yeah. I'm a terrible pedestrian. Like I'm a jaywalker. So when I see cyclists breaking traffic lights and I get mad at it, I kind of think, well, I do that all the time on 2 feet, But the one thing that comes up all the time, I walk a huge amount, and cyclists in kind of cycle lanes that are half path, half cycle lane, and especially the ones in the Lycra gear doing Tour de France speeds on the flat are absolutely potentially lethal to me, a pedestrian. But like I said, there's bad pedestrians.
There are,
well,
and that's I think that there's a thesis in the relationship between road users as well. But frequently, as a sometimes cyclist, the infrastructure that's in place particularly around the city centre in Dublin, forces cyclists to behave in a way that that you probably shouldn't be. But it's the idea of the way you get these councillors and politicians who come out every now and then and go, we've built 114 kilometres of cycle path. Like, you haven't. What you've done is you've got a bucket of paint and a brush, and you've got into an actual a motor lane that fits a car and probably nothing much more.
Yeah.
And over half of that you've painted a dotted line.
Yeah, with a bike.
There's no cycle lane involved there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll maybe stop there, but more tomorrow.
I've got into Twitter spats with cyclists, so I'm not going there.
Okay, fair enough. There's evidence. Phil Egan in studio next with all the day's sports news. But first, before that, if Paul, you want to stick your headphones in there for a second.
Oh, yeah.
We're just going to play you this, a throwback to one of our Olympia road shows with Brian O'Driscoll and Ronan O'Gara.
It's just not right, you know what I mean? The fellas are from Cork or Limerick or Tipperary, and there are fellas from Sandymount and well, I keep going.
Where are you staying tonight?
and Dalkey and Delaney and Barnhall and...
What do you think of Rogers, South Dublin? Let's be broad about it. Impersonations there, Delaney.
Yeah, very good actually. Yeah. I mean, he would be no stranger to Montenotti, I would suggest. Which is kind of their version of.
Shots fired is what I'm taking from that. Phil, good morning to you.
Morning, lads.
What's happening?
Well, we're going to start with Liverpool. Chance to go top of the league. I know you've been talking about it, and given the fact Huddersfield have only won 3 games all season, 2 of those against Wolves, I think there's a fair chance to say Liverpool are going to be on 91 points by about 10 o'clock this evening, 2 ahead of Manchester City. Only 8 times in Premier League history has a team reached 90 points or more. All 8 of those teams have won the league. The last team, or the closest to 90 without winning, Manchester United, 89 points they got. In 2012, they were pipped by Manchester City on goal difference, and it was the day that Sergio Aguero scored that dramatic winner against QPR. So that Liverpool could be the unluckiest runners-up, but manager Jurgen Klopp says whatever happens, his team will have no regrets.
If we will do it, we will do it. If we will not do it, there are no regrets, as long as we give always our best. And I saw that the whole season from the boys, but still, the season, however it ends up, is only the first step in that area.
Yeah, that game at Anfield kicks off at 8 o'clock. Liverpool and Manchester City contested the FA Youth Cup last night. Liverpool won 5-3 on penalties to finish 1-1 after extra time. Gavin Bazunu was among the substitutes for City, and first time since 2007 Liverpool have won the FA Youth Cup. Another big game in the SSE Electricity League Premier Division tonight, following on from Tuesday's Dublin derby at a packed Tallaght Stadium. Rovers will be looking to bounce back from that defeat to Bohemians. They take on Dundalk, the champions, at Oriel Park, and Rovers go into the game with a 5-point lead, but they've played a game more than everyone. Dundalk are 7 behind Rovers, so they've a chance to close the gap on 4 by 2-4, and then they'll obviously still have a game in hand. That one kicks off at 8 o'clock. 7:45, then Bohemians, who are in second place, will host Waterford at Dalymount Park. Derry City face Cork City at the Brandywell. St Patrick home to UCD. Will Sligo Rovers and Finn Harps meet at the Showgrounds. And in the first division, Bray Wanderers play Cabinteely, Shelbourne take on Galway, and Wexford face Athlone Town. Your local club, Adrian.
It's been a while, Phil.
It's been a while since
Lapsed fan.
St Mel's Park, that's gone.
Yeah, I used to go down there quite regularly.
Yeah.
You would have been in Athlone native for a while.
It was gone then. Bray are my local club now.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
You out there much?
I'm not enough, so I'll have to certainly get down on Friday night's local derby against Cabinteely.
League of Ireland fan, Paul? Or?
I was in my youth. I was a Shamrock Rovers fan when I was at school. That great 4 in a row team of the 1980s. I haven't. I mean, to be honest, I covered quite a lot of League of Ireland football when I was a sports writer. And when I quit sports writing about 14 years ago now, I actually don't go to a lot of sporting events anymore. So
you always talk about that happening in your life with such fondness, by the way. It's the glint in your eye about I got out of the game.
The thing is, you can start to enjoy it because it's not work anymore.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
when you don't have to file on the whistle, 1,000 words about a match you've only half seen.
Curse of that injury time winner.
Yeah.
Changed the whole thing. No action for any of the Irish players on day one of the Zurich Classic of New Orleans due to a rain delay. This is the team event, and the format is foursomes on day 1 and 3, and then four ball on day 1 and 3, and foursomes on 2 and 4. Scott Stallings and Trey Mullinax lead on 11 under. Paul Dunn has parred his first hole on day 2 of the Trophy Asana Morocco, so he's level par. England's Jordan Smith is out in front on 7 under. Leash boxer TJ Doheny is predicting fireworks in California in the early hours of tomorrow morning. The IBF World Super Bantamweight champion, who lives in Australia now, goes up against WBA champion Danny Roman. 32-year-old Doheny has the chance to become only the 4th Irish boxer to unify world titles after Carl Frampton, Ryan Burnett and Katie Taylor. We looked ahead to this one and Off the Brawl with Andy Lee earlier in the week, and here's how it went down.
Depends how they match up, how the styles gel. Romain he's a Latino fighter with a typical rhythm, but he can punch and he can box a bit, and he's quite clever too. He's clever. He'll slip and punch at the same time, and he'll meet your punches. Like TJ is a good southpaw, and he's a bit of a puncher. Always had a good fight, and TJ looks like the bigger man to me. It'd be interesting to see how they match up together, but TJ looks like the bigger man.
And Roman, his combinations are. You couldn't say he has a go-to combination. It seems to be like, I saw him one time he threw 2 left hooks in a row, or 2 left uppercuts in a row.
Yeah, he has it. He has it all. He's a class operator.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great fight. Really good fight.
Hasn't like he has 2 losses, but they were very early, and like we spoke about Tevin Farmer, and he's another example of building a career and becoming and improving as you go on.
Yeah, if you want to watch that, about 4 a.m. they reckon that fight will start at, or you can just do the sensible thing and record it.
That's what you'll do, I presume.
And watch it as live in the morning by staying off social media.
Yeah, you can check out the full preview on offtheball.com, I presume, Off the Brawl.
Yeah, absolutely. And Australian Sean Dancer has been announced as the new head coach of the Irish senior women's hockey team. He represented Australia at underage or under 21 level, takes over from Graham Shaw, who stepped down in March to take up a similar role with New Zealand. And if you want to go to offtheball.com, you can get more details on that move. Sean Dancer, the new coach. Neil Robertson will resume 5-3 up in Sean Murphy later this morning in the second round of the World Snooker Championship in Sheffield. This evening, Mark Selby will start 5-3 down to Gary Wilson. And last night, when we were all asleep, the NFL draft kicked off in Nashville. The Arizona Cardinals had the first pick. They went for a quarterback, 21-year-old Oklahoma quarterback Kyler Murray, who won the Heisman Trophy, and he's only 5'10", small for a quarterback. And it's the second year in a row Arizona went for a quarterback. So I'd imagine Josh Rosen, who was last year's pick, is probably looking at the draft going, that doesn't really bode well for me. I'm on the move. But Kyler Murray also was a first-round draft pick in the Major League Baseball last year, but he's going to be an American footballer.
You've 1 minute before you get out of here. We're about to get into the most anticipated section of the morning, where we reveal Paul's top 5 that he instantly regretted once it was put to paper as Liverpool top 5 of all time. I'm not going to quite put you on that much of a spot, but your top 2 or 3 Liverpool players of all time?
I suppose I'm kind of going from kind of the late 90s.
That's put your own parameters on it, Phil.
You know, it might, I don't know. Like Steven Gerrard is probably he's going to have to be number 1. Luis Suarez has to be there. Virgil van Dijk is getting close at the moment. Robbie Fowler. They're just some off the top of my head. Fernando
Torres. Will any of
Torres.
these names feature in Paul's top 5 is the big question. We're going to reveal that in just a few minutes' time, Phil. You'll be tuned in for it.
Just before I go I mentioned the draft.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine there was a Premier League draft. Here's one to mull over. Now, none of you can draft players from outside. Has to be within the Premier League. Who would your number 1 pick be?
You can draft players from within the Premier League.
Yeah, it's just purely Premier League. So you can't go, I want Messi or Ronaldo.
Yeah.
So the 20 teams that are in the Premier League right now, who would your number 1 pick be?
From within the Premier League?
Yeah, right now.
A player who's currently playing in the Premier League, to be absolutely clear about it. I mean, Van Dijk would probably be it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Van Dijk, no question.
Yeah. Right, that's that. We've decided. Thanks, William. Cheers for that. Paul is going to reveal his Liverpool top 5 in just a moment. We've already revealed that John Barnes does feature in it. He was at one of our off-the-ball roadshows at Vicar Street back in May 2015. Take a look.
And I also understood from a very early age, and it is still true now, about racism in sport, if you like, rather than racism in life. The racism that exists in life is much more impactful than in sport. Because in sport, in many respects, it's unreal. Because whoever racially abused me when I played for Watford against West Ham, for example. Well, if I played for West Ham and I scored a hat-trick, they'll cheer me. And, you know, so I got racially abused by Liverpool fans when I played for Watford. Then I went to Liverpool, the Evertonians racially abused me. If I played for Everton and I scored a hat-trick, maybe the Liverpool, we don't know.
Yeah.
So in sport, if you score goals, we always look for something to get at the opposition. Whereas what's much more important is in everyday life, when we see inner cities and we see the social climate in terms of education and housing and what's going on if you just want to talk about black and white in inner cities with young black kids not being able to get a good education and good housing. And I think a lot of people are absolving themselves of responsibility by saying society is fine, it's just football's problem.
Yeah.
And that for me is the biggest crime.
It's only 5.
John Barnes there at Vicar Street back in 2015. The debate, as you can hear, continues about the makeup of Paul's top Liverpool 5 players of all time. I said it's on paper, so I mean that's it done. We maybe include a caveat at the end. We're going to kick off in reverse order. Take us through them.
Well, I think Robbie Fowler, and you know this is the controversy because you know it's Robbie Fowler or Steven Gerrard. That's the debate for the last few days in my head. And I've gone with Robbie Fowler, and I've gone with my heart. You know,
you have him in at number 3 on this list of your top 5.
You have apparently. Oh, I have. Yeah. I may have moved him actually. I'm making this up as I go along.
So Robbie Fowler, it's a really interesting one. Probably could have been Liverpool's greatest player of all time.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's why I have this debate that Gerrard did it and Robbie Fowler. It's kind of like a George Best thing without the disintegration of his personal life thing. That he was kind of done in his mid-20s. And I remember him scoring 5 goals in one of his first games for Liverpool. Might have been against Fulham in a cup match, a League Cup match. And he was a kid, he was really, really young. And you just thought, this guy... I mean, he's definitely the most natural finisher I've ever seen. I think Steve McManaman said that he's the best player he's ever played with. Yeah. And, it is easy to forget just how good he was. And when Liverpool sold him... it broke his heart. I mean, I watched him playing for Leeds and watched him playing for Manchester City. It was just like watching a ghost wander around the pitch. His heart was broken. He only ever wanted to play for Liverpool. I also liked the other parts of his personality, the support for the Dockers, the Liverpool Dockers, when he pulled up his shirt after scoring a goal. And they fined him and he said, I don't care. He
had a personality.
He had a personality. And then there was this famous match against Arsenal when he was through on goal and David Seaman came out, dived at his feet. Fowler went over him. Referee awarded a penalty. Fowler chased the referee and tried to persuade him not to give the penalty. Wow. And then Fowler missed the penalty. Jason McAteer scored the rebound. But it was always that thing of, I always wondered, did he do it on purpose, Yeah. But the Liverpool fans played it, they used to call him God. And, fans tend to exaggerate the value of players, but to me, when he was playing, they kind of got that just about right.
Yeah, 183 goals, I think, is what I had here, which is some way off Liverpool's top scorer of all time. He's in at number 3 in your list, so we're going to bounce about a bit here, but we'll go to number 5.
Okay.
Who is Kevin Keegan.
Kevin Keegan, yeah. I mean, Kevin Keegan...
Controversial, this one.
Yeah, because Kevin Keegan, people who don't remember the 70s would kind of see Kevin Keegan as a bit of a joke figure because of what happened at Newcastle, because of what happened when he was England manager, when he announced one game, I think they lost to Germany 1-0 at Wembley, the first qualifying match of the European Championships, I think it was, or the World Cup for 2002, he announced, I'm not up to this job, and walked out. So I think people of a certain vintage only really remember the sort of joke Kevin Keegan figure, the manager who lost his bottle in the Championship.
But even the player, even almost by his own admission, was almost more of a grafter than natural talent.
I never really bought that. I mean, Keegan always said that he didn't have the talent of other players, so he had to work 5 times harder. Keegan had a huge amount of talent, enormous amount of talent. And he was the start of it. Shankly bought him as a midfielder and immediately saw that, he was Toshak's partner. That's how he was used. And, Liverpool, no question, winning their first European Cup in 77, Keegan played a huge part in that. But then he went off to Germany and played for Hamburg, a fashionable German club, and was European Player of the Year 2 years in a row, playing for Hamburg, and then brought them to the 1980 European Cup final, and he was their star. So I always took that with a pinch of salt when Keegan said he didn't have the talent of other players. He was incredibly talented.
He's number 5 on the list. We've mentioned number 4 already, John Barnes, worth recapping on, crafty, slightly at odds, we mentioned a bit earlier in the show, with the general sort of player at that time, but his style was just so attractive.
Yeah, and for me, that's the best Liverpool team I ever saw, that team with the late 1980s, 88, 89, 90. And John Barnes was the player who made it all work. I don't really buy into this assists thing. People are obsessed with assists now. I don't recognise them as a thing. But if you counted up his assists, I think he was probably responsible for half of Ray Houghton's goals during that era, half of John Aldridge's, and probably most of Peter Beardsley's as well. He was just involved in everything. And as Ray Houghton said, he was unplayable. Players shrank, like fullbacks shrank when they came up against him.
Yeah. So that's number 4. Number 3, Robbie Fowler. In at number 2, so the top 2, this list gets more controversial as it goes. So in at number 2 is the greatest Liverpool goal scorer of all time, essentially.
Ian Rush, yeah. Yeah, Ian Rush. I followed Liverpool throughout my childhood, which was the late 70s and the 80s. And the main difference between Liverpool and United during that time was Ian Rush. I mean, that was the main difference. Like, United had great players, but they didn't have Ian Rush. They didn't have, I think one season Rush got 48 goals in a season, which was incredible, but they didn't have a consistent finisher like that. And he could score goals from all kinds of goals, like headers, left foot, right foot. And then his partnership with Dalglish was one of the greatest attacking partnerships of all time. That Dalglish adjusted his game to suit Rush, and playing these balls through. Just so many of Rush's goals in that era were Dalglish playing him through, Rush staying just onside, and beating the keeper in a one-on-one. There was just no question when he was in a one-on-one with the keeper where that ball was going. Yeah, incredible record. 346 goals. Like you talk about Robbie Fowler's 183. Yeah, but the difference is Robbie Fowler's didn't amount to anything, whereas Rush's amounted to league titles, lots European Cups.
Yeah. Number one is the great man himself. 13 years, European Cup winner. He was that. 13 years and a barrel full of trophies and medals and legacies. And
Kenny Dalglish, yeah. I mean, he was Liverpool. I mean, to me, he is the personification of that great era. That as a kid I thought was going to go on forever. That Liverpool team. And I remember as a kid crying when Kevin Keegan was leaving Liverpool, because I thought this was the end of something. Like, I was about 6 years old, and my dad said, "Wait to see what's coming in next." And they bought Kenny Dalglish from Celtic to replace him, and he'd already had a really successful career at Celtic when he wasn't young. He wasn't 21 years of age, and he was just superb, and I mean, he changed his game as well. I mean, his goals, if you watch a highlights reel of his goals, they're just outstanding goals. Incredible. And he never really got the credit, because Scotland always underperformed in World Cups. He was never talked about in the same breath as Cruyff, for instance, But he was every bit as good. One of his specialities was curling the ball in. Like, he could put a great bend on the ball. And then, like I said, when he played with Rush later on, he adjusted his game and just became the provider. Like, he played behind Rush and just essentially served him up opportunities. Served him up what we now call a big assists guy. But nowadays he'd be called, people would talk about his great assists ability. But it was so much more than just assists. He made that Liverpool team work. Yeah, it's interesting. At times controversial list that I haven't put Stephen Gerrard in,
You haven't put Stevie G in there. As with any great list, it's what's not in it is generally what comes to talking about. No Stevie G, no Graham Souness, maybe less controversial. Suarez is getting a lot of love in some of our interactions as well.
You see, it was so short with Suarez, and again, it didn't lead to anything. There was no, they didn't win the league that year. But for me, Suarez, it was 2 seasons really. It was 2 seasons.
It's a list of great Liverpool players as opposed to great players
who were great for Liverpool. And Stevie G, because I will be asked to explain it. I mean, I always liked John Giles' assessment of Gerrard, which was that he was a player who was capable of great things rather than a great player, and he frustrated me as much as he amazed me as a player. I mean, the famous Chelsea match in 2014 where he slipped. I thought the best thing that Rodgers could have done that day was substitute him, take him off at half time, because the second half became all about his personal redemption. It was shots from the edge of the box. He wanted that moment of redemption.
That said, but at the same time, if you compare him to some of the other players that you have in your list and the teams that most of those players played in, maybe Fowler to a slightly lesser degree, but the quality of the teams that those players played in versus what Gerrard played in and what he achieved with them, like he's looking at the stats, 5th highest goal scorer for a player in his position at Liverpool of all time. And like a scorer of great goals, obviously,
and great moments,
moments, and dragging and like winning trophies at a time, helping Liverpool to win trophies. I mean, that's understating it, at a time when it seemed exceptionally unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, you are persuading me. I'm eminently persuadable on this point of dropping Fowler for Gerrard. But like you said, you had the graphic made. But yeah, I mean, I do take your point. And I think if Gerrard had gone to a club where he was playing with better players, I think we might have even seen true greatness from Gerrard. But there was that moment in 2005 where it looked like he was going to go to Chelsea, and he chose to stay. He chose to stay at Liverpool. And it's counterintuitive for me to say this as a Liverpool fan, but I wonder, was that the right decision for him as a player? Like, I wonder, I wonder, did it say something about him as a player, that he would rather be this big fish in this small pond rather than go and test himself, you know? But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, if I had 6, he's number 6, and he was pushing Fowler off, and Fowler was pushing him back. But I think the thing with Fowler is, the reason I picked Fowler was, he was a natural finisher, and also if he had played in a great team, the things Fowler could have done, if that had been a serious Liverpool team, they were just such a team of underachievers. That team from the 90s, the early ones he played in weren't much good, but later on they had good players, and his link up with McManaman. I mean, they really should have delivered a lot more, but they just didn't come across as serious people who were serious about their business.
Huge amount of reaction to our viewers' top Liverpool players of all time. Keith Nevin has gone with Firmino. Some of these have a huge amount of recency bias. I'll put that out there before we begin. Number 5, Roberto Firmino. Number 4, John Barnes. Number 3, Ray Houghton. Number 2, Xabi Alonso. And number 1, Ronnie Whelan. I mean, I think that's a large recency and Irish bias about it, but it's...
But Ronnie Whelan makes it on the show us your medals argument alone. I mean,
So who's the greatest Irish Liverpool player of all time? I mean, forgetting about... I mean, medals is clearly a part of it. Laura would be up there. Highway, by all accounts. I didn't see much of him, but by all accounts...
Yeah, Highway was great. I think Whelan, who else? Michael Robinson.
John Aldridge was short-lived probably.
Yeah, I mean, Aldridge was just there for 2-3 seasons. In terms of influence on the team and medals won, I think Whelan.
Right.
Yeah.
Colin Farrell goes with Kenny Dalglish, Ian Rush, Stephen Gerrard, Alan Hansen and John Barnes. Don't know about the order on that. Whelan, Barnes, Gerrard, Carragher and Finnan. A couple of shots that we hadn't heard before from David Cusack there. Stevie G for David Combs, Colin O'Connor, Xabi Alonso, Ian Rush, Kenny Dalglish, Robbie Fowler and Daniel Agger.
Right.
5 seconds of silence.
I know that's tongue in cheek. I suspect it's tongue in cheek. But Agger at one point I thought was going to be a great Liverpool captain. It ended really quickly with Agger, but I looked at him at one point and thought that's a future captain. He was great. Yeah.
I'm hoping it's tongue in cheek. Brandon Walsh goes with Gerrard, Barnes, Dalglish, Rush and Alonso. And Emma Carroll, who's in the box out there this morning, says Fowler, Gerrard, Rush, McManaman, who's not one we've seen elsewhere, and Xabi Alonso. Xabi Alonso is another one of those incredible footballers who, had he stayed, probably is the thing.
Yeah, and again, it was his relationship with Rafa Benitez soured. And this was sort of the 2009 team when they had that great midfield, with Mascherano and Gerrard and Sissoko, and I really thought that was the start of something. Like I thought, especially with the Champions League win, there's a few kind of lean years after that, but 2009 they really looked like a team, and then there was this talk that Rafa was looking around for a replacement for Alonso, and it was clear they'd fallen out, and it was the end. It was the kind of start of the end for that what was a potentially great Liverpool team.
Yeah. I suspect that the reaction to this is going to continue over the course of the day, so keep an eye on your Twitter feed.
Oh, it's be staying off Twitter after that. I'll just block the conversation.
Thanks for that, Paul. I really enjoyed it. We said you will have plenty of opportunity to get your top 5 into us over the course of the day. And we've got this inside this bag, the brand new Liverpool jersey that could be winging its way to you if you are drawn from our lottery. So, busy few weeks ahead in Irish racing. The 2019 Punchestown Festival get underway Tuesday the 30th of April. That's Tuesday coming, runs until Saturday the 4th of May. The Close Brothers Commercial Finance Mayor's Listed Novice Hurdle on the Thursday is going to take place on the 2nd of May. And here off the ball, we're giving you a daily prize of 2 tickets with entry to the reserved enclosure at the Punchestown Racecourse, including lunch on the day. So a lovely prize. And we're also going to throw in a shuttle bus as well, an overnight stay and an evening meal for 2 at the Louis Fitzgerald Hotel. So plenty of good stuff with that, and to be in with a chance of winning, you'll have to tune into Off the Ball tonight from 7 o'clock. It is 9:15 on this Friday morning. We've got some GA next for you on OTB AM. We're going to hear from Leitrim boss Terry Hyland in a moment, but first the legendary DJ Kerry joined Nathan to chat about why he is taking on the challenge of managing the Kilkenny minor footballers, and revealed that he's brought a few special guests down to training.
Well, I have to be, very honest. Jim Gavin came down and gave us a great coaching session last year, and he was delighted to come down, and whatever we picked up from there. But, Mickey Hart is a hero of mine. Like Eamon Fitzmaurice, I just like to see the attitude, but and then try and impart it onto the field. But, not that it was hard work, but when you're trying to change your mind, if you're a hurler, and all of our lads are hurlers, and every one of them had ambitions of being on the Kilkenny minor hurling this year, bar I think 2. Right, so everyone else had ambitions, so they were all hurlers. So to try and change a mindset from being able to strike a ball 80 or 90 yards out of defence to actually hand passing it and foot kicking it maybe 10 yards or 15 yards and working it out and holding on to possession was a different mindset completely. But before that, before you can do any of that, Nathan, you have to be able to coach, or you have to be able to learn. If you're the young fella that's learning, you have to be able to learn to kick it, you have to be able to learn to catch it, you have to be able to learn to hand pass it. So all that had to be brought into it along the way as well. But I would give our young fellas and our parents of the young fellas fantastic admiration, because I'm not saying the clubs didn't promote it. We had 16 clubs involved in that minor setup, but certainly the parents, there was no expenses over the last 3 years. There was no meals after training. There was no meals after the couple of matches that we did get to play. So there was nothing. And to be honest, and I understand this, when we looked for challenge matches, we couldn't really get them because we were only Kilkenny football. So, Waterford, in fairness to them, played us, and Carlow a couple of times played us. And then we played in a tournament there back in January. So other than that, we probably have played 5 matches or 6 matches in the 3 years.
I'm joined here in Mayo by Leitrim's Terry Hyland. We're just talking about knock. Not that you guys need the novenas at the moment.
No. Look, we'll take all the inspiration we can get now, but we're not looking for any spiritual one yet.
I don't think you need it so far. You had a great league.
Yes, look, we had a good year so far, and I always reference it back to the FBD game we had against Mayo, which kind of set us up for us. It showed the lads that they could compete against the so-called stronger lads, and it set them up for the league, I think, from there.
It might seem like a silly question, but what is the difference between the Mayos and the Leitrims of the world? Because like you said, the FBD game showed, I know people say it was early in the year, blah, 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 but I don't take any truck with that, because when you perform against Mayo, you're performing with the best. Yeah, well,
physical condition is probably the major one, and it comes back to the level of coaching, and it goes back to a lot of the other stuff. I'm a firm believer, just because you're a small county means that you're not weaker. They can actually become stronger if you put in the resources into it, and that is the difference in the bigger, strong counties. The resources are going in there, whereas maybe in the small ones, through no fault of their own, they can't afford that.
What would change that?
I think Croke Park could change that. I think it's where the direct the funds to. You know what I mean? I always reference is if you go to a club in Dublin that 1 or maybe 2 full-time coaches in it, where you go to a county league treat them, like last year only had 1. Okay, they have 3 now. So you work it out that way. That's 1 or 3 among 20 clubs, whereas Dublin has 2 for each club.
That actually is a big difference, and sometimes people might just look at Leitrim and say it's got the smallest population in Ireland, therefore they're never going to be that good, but that's looking at it very black and white.
Yeah, and that's what I say to get them in the end of the day, if you put enough work in any particular group, they will improve. You give them a system and you give them the wherewithal to do it, they will improve. And if it's done at a young enough age and enough of groundwork put into them, they will compete with everybody else.
You're known for thinking outside the box. Like, for example, we all heard about how the Leitrim footballers were training in Dublin, the ones who were Dublin-based, rather than dragging them back and forth, which I often think it's still very an old-fashioned approach to coaching, to force lads to travel maybe 3 hours by road, to run around a field for 2 hours to go back.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's a crazy scenario, to be honest with you. We have built in Abbottstown in Dublin, which is open to all the counties, but it's not big enough. In the end of the day, we are all migrating towards the East Coast, for let it be for work or whatever it is, you know what I mean? So if 2/3 of the population is in the East Coast, there has to be the facilities there to manage that and to handle that. And, we looked at it. We had, at one stage, we had 21 players training in Dublin and we had 12 training in Leitrim. So, it didn't make sense with dragging 21 lads down the road. So we've just done split sessions with them.
Is that hard then to bring the cohesiveness back together when you're doing a full training session together, or are you making sure that all the coaches basically are on the same page?
We just make sure they're all on the same page, and especially in the start of the league, it's a lot of his S&C, as you said, and it's running around the field literally, but it's not literally running around the field. But it is part of that, and it'll cross over. And once you have good guys with you, and you trust them, and you sit down and you work out a plan, and they can carry it out. And at the end of the day, where they may do it slightly different, you're all trying to get to the same end of it. So,
Hurlers and footballers, some who have quit for one reason or another, and they've always kind of said it off the record that time of year when you're being forced to travel, it can really, really put a downer on you because you're tired, emotionally tired, you're physically tired, you're mentally tired. To be forced to travel across country, it's made them think twice about maybe committing, and they might opt out. I suppose you can understand that because it's tough going.
Yeah, well, look, as I say, if you have to drive 2 hours to do 2 hours work and drive 2 hours back, it's the wrong job. And it's as simple as that. And it's no different. The guy would have had, when I gave up a calf and I had counties rang me to see would I be interested, and the first thing I said was, where's the distance? No, I says it wouldn't work for me. I couldn't sit that long in the car. So when I said that to myself, how could I ask the player to do it?
That's a very simplistic but a positive way to look at it, because some managers do expect that. Yeah,
well, look, everybody is wired differently, as I said. Some people think that if you get up and run at 6 o'clock in the morning and lads are fatigued and they're not fit to do something, that's the right way to train. Another lad says, well, if you left them lying in bed until 11 o'clock when they're rested, that's the right way to do it. So everybody's a different approach.
And it's difficult as well to get your rest, because when you're an elite inter-county footballer or hurler, you have to work as well, or you have to go to college. You're not being paid. You might be as professional can be, but you still got to make a wage.
That's it. And and that's the hard facts of it, and you still have to get on in life. And having reared a family, I know I can understand and see where fellas, and I tell lads in inter-county footballer, when you come to 30, your football is coming to an end. You have a lot of your life left to live. You better be prepared for it. So there's no point in saying just because I played inter-county football for 10 years is going to bring me to the rest of life. It doesn't. They have to get other platforms in. So that's where their education and all that is so important. And then when they're in jobs and that, and I think it's incumbent on the GA to try and facilitate lads with work and get them work. And get them into jobs that facilitates them to play inter-county football.
That was something Mick O'Dwyer was very famous for. He made sure that Kerry lads had jobs in Kerry whenever he could.
Yeah, well, that's it, But unfortunately, as we mentioned before, everyone's migrating to the East Coast. It was very hard to get employment at home. And look, from a lifestyle issue, not everybody wants to live in their own county. Not everybody wants to be at home in rural Ireland, you know what I mean? But it's up to us to facilitate them as best we can.
Finally, obviously, the first game is Roscommon in the Hyde. I'd say you're looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I look forward to every game. If it's only a challenge match next weekend, I look forward. And that's the fun in football. No matter what people say, you know what I mean? I think it's great if you're sitting here being interviewed by you or you're doing something else. That's what it's about. It's not. It's about the game.
I'm not that bad, am I?
No, you're not that bad. But the highlight is the football, and the highlight is Roscommon and the championship and the big crowds, and they get the team out and get them to perform in front of those crowds. And I think Croke Park will be helpful in that, because they have experience now suddenly what it is like to play in front of maybe bigger crowds than 4,000 or 5,000, and I'm sure the Hyde will probably be into double digit figures, whatever it would be on that opening day. But it brings a totally different challenge. I mean, they're playing against team that's more conditioned than them and has been longer on the road than them and has been playing at a higher level than them. You know what I mean? But it's a good test for Leitrim and see how they can perform and how they can hold in there in the game and make sure that before the game is over that, we are in a shout here, we can push on and win this game.
All right, as the fallout continues from the Israel Folau comments and Billy Vunipola's reaction to it, I'm delighted to say we're joined on the line by the Saracens season ticket holder Nick Wells. Good morning to you, Nick. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks. Nick, as someone who's gay, what have you made of Billy Vunipola's support of the Israel Folau comments, I suppose initially, and your own club's reaction to that?
Yeah, so I think the comments initially were really disappointing. Obviously, he's a figurehead for the club. He's one of our biggest players. He's an England player. it's very disappointing as a Saracens fan to hear what he has to think about LGBT people. The club itself, I think the response has been really poor. I don't think it would have taken much for them to have reaffirmed their commitment to LGBT staff and fans. They could have done a lot more to sanction Billy. As far as I'm aware, his post is still up on Instagram, so he hasn't taken that down. He hasn't apologised. And so the club could definitely do more to reassure LGBT fans like myself.
Yeah, and he specifically obviously has been given some high-profile opportunities to step back from the comments and hasn't taken it. But the Saracens statement specifically, at Saracens, we are one family, open to all with the firm view that everyone should be treated equally with respect and humility. That's one section, obviously, of the larger statement that our viewers can see on screen there. Have you felt part of that one family these last few weeks?
It's really difficult because Saracens does pride itself on being a family. I've been a lifelong Saracens fan. I've always felt a part of that Saracens family. But it does stick in the throat a bit that they haven't come out and done a lot more to support LGBT fans specifically. They could have, for example, reaffirmed their commitment. They could have donated some money to a local LGBT charity or an LGBT sports charity just to show that they are really committed to LGBT fans and LGBT staff that work at Saracens too.
I wondered on a practical level if you felt that same connection to the team in the weeks that have followed. Were you cheering as loudly as you would normally do, obviously, against Munster at the weekend? Or what's your connection? How has your connection or relationship with the club been altered or affected by this?
Yeah, so my support for the rugby team is still the same, so I'm cheering just as loudly. I think it is just slightly disappointing. I sent an email to the club to explain my disappointment last Saturday. Their response wasn't very good. They said they acknowledged the points that I made, but didn't reaffirm their commitment, didn't apologise on behalf of Billy, anything like that. I do slightly support some of the fans who have been booing Billy, so the Bristol fans who booed him the weekend after he made the comments, the fans of the weekend who booed him as well. He does need to recognise that he has offended a lot of people. He has disappointed a lot of rugby fans. And so I am sort of slightly erring on the side of supporting those fans who did show their displeasure with his comments a couple of weeks ago. It
does feel, listening to him on TV after the game when he was asked about the booing, and like it feels like we're in a bizarre sort of a scenario where both Billy Vunipola and indeed the wider team are taking some sort of siege mentality, comfort from this stuff in a way that's sort of helping drive them on almost.
Yeah, so he said it gave him that extra bit of motivation, which if he was being booed because he's a brilliant player, then fine, he can take that motivation from that. He's being booed because he made comments that upset a lot of people and made some LGBT fans feel uncomfortable. So he should really recognise that, not take motivation from it, but instead qualify some of his comments, come out and apologise for the hurt that he's caused to some fans like myself.
Again, paraphrasing from Billy Vunipola's own statement here, I can see that my recent post has hurt people. My intention was never to cause suffering. My intention was to express my belief in the Word of God. These beliefs are a source of great strength, comfort and guidance in my life. This is deeply personal and does not represent the views of my team, and goes on to give more detail around his own beliefs and faith and praise of God and that kind of thing. Presume there's not much comfort for you in those words either.
No, and I think as Gareth Thomas said on Channel 4, we don't feel much love or support from his comments that he made in support of Israel Folau. So he should come out and apologise. He hasn't yet apologised for the hurt that he's caused. He said he didn't mean to, but it would take a simple apology to say that he has recognised it has hurt some fans. He's sorry for that, and he'll sort of reflect on that in the future. And the club, again, should do a lot more. It puts the players in a difficult position, because if you're asked how you feel about your own teammate, you don't want to throw him under the bus, but you also can't support him because you know what that will have, what effect that will have on fans like myself. So it puts them in a really difficult position, but the club should be much stronger in supporting LGBT fans, in saying that Billy's comments were wrong, and making him apologise and take that post down.
Yeah, it does bring into question that idea of one family, really. If it looks like it's really just words at this remove, unless there's further action, which at this stage looks unlikely, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that the response from fans, so on social media, across Instagram and Twitter, the response from Saracens fans has been fantastic. It really does feel like a family of fans. The fans clearly think that his comments are inappropriate. They would like him to come out and apologise, but the club itself hasn't been as strong in that, and that's, I think, the disappointing thing for me. Obviously, I'm 26 at the moment. I'm really confident with who I am. There are some people who are maybe slightly younger than me. There may be some players in the academy, there may be some staff who aren't as comfortable, who aren't as confident, who might be a lot more disappointed by these comments, who might take them a lot more personally. It might make them feel a lot more uncomfortable about supporting the club. So the club should recognise that and do more to support those people.
Yeah, actually, I've been very interested by the reaction to it, and there's been like the booing from the Munster fans and the Bristol supporters, and there's been a lot of support. There has been a not insignificant amount of commentary that I've seen, having read, listened and watched to a lot of the coverage of it, to the Israel Folau comments and the Billy Vunipola comments. A not insignificant amount of fans who are saying it's been dealt with, move on, get over it. What do you say to those comments?
Yeah, I think it wouldn't take much to move on from these comments. If the club came out and said, we've sanctioned him, he's apologised, he's taken the post down, perhaps we've docked some of his wages and we've donated it to local charities, things like that, we can then move on. But at the moment, we haven't had that apology. The club hasn't made him take the post down. And so it's difficult to move on from those comments without really drawing a line under it and properly apologising for what's been said. There are still some fans who think that it's been dealt with. I don't know how many of those fans are sort of LGBT fans who feel it as strongly as others. For me, we can move on from it. It just takes a bit more from Billy, a bit more from the club to qualify their support.
If that isn't forthcoming, where does that leave you in terms of your relationship with Saracens?
I'll always be a Saracens fan. I think I will still support the club. The team is brilliant. The fans are brilliant. The atmosphere is fantastic. It will just always be a slight bone of contention for me that they couldn't come out and do more. But I'm still confident that they can do more. They will do more. And hopefully, if they hear comments like this, they'll recognise that they still haven't drawn a line under it, that fans still are upset, and they'll do more to reassure people like myself.
And there was also the people were commenting largely on the commentary of the game, obviously, as well on BT Sport, and like it felt as if there was a little bit of a jar in terms of the understanding of the enormity of, I suppose, what was ongoing for BT commentary. And they've been out since. They've spoken to the 42 this week here, and they've the commentary at the time was about probably the toughest week or 10 days of Billy Vunipola's life. The response saying that they don't accept any sort of discrimination, in the words of BT, that they had treated the appearance of Billy Vunipola in the context of the rugby match. What were your thoughts on the commentary of the weekend?
Yeah, I think they got the tone wrong. I think a lot of people recognise they got the tone wrong. It was almost that Billy was the victim in this scenario. For me, he wasn't the victim. He put himself in this position, and he should apologise to those who actually he caused offence to. Channel 4 did a much better job. They came out and said that although they'd had Billy on the show before, given that he hasn't apologised for his comments and because of what he said, they wouldn't have him on the show again, and obviously got Gareth Thomas on to talk about his experience, which I think is a much better tone to take. It recognises LGBT people specifically, and maybe BT could reflect on that in the next couple of weeks.
We're mildly obsessed, obviously, about the final upcoming, Nick, on this side of the water as well. We do have a vested interest over here. What are your thoughts on how this one's going to go on the 11th of May?
It will be very tight, I imagine. I think Saracens will keep it really tight, but I think Saracens will win by less than one score.
Right, well, I mean, that's one note we can't agree on, unfortunately, this morning. Nick, really well spoken, well communicated. Thanks a million for taking our call this morning.
That's all right, thank you very much.
Yeah, that was my conversation with Saracens season ticket holder Nick Wells yesterday. You can check out the full piece again up on offtheball.com. There have been developments, obviously, since that, specifically Bundy Aki yesterday on Instagram with a clarification of a reaction that he had to Israel Folau's initial post. Read you out the Instagram post here. Just want to address that I mistakenly liked Israel Folau's post without paying any attention to the content. When I realised what the post was about, I immediately unliked it straight away, as it does not reflect my views as a Christian. Yes, I do believe in God, but my belief is that he's a God of kindness, peace, and loves people in all aspects. I have family members, friends, and I've worked with many people who are gay, and I have nothing but love and respect for every one of them. I do want to apologise for any confusion or offence this may have caused anyone, and I will pay more attention to what I like in the future. That was Bundy Aki on Instagram yesterday. It seemed like a pretty reasonable, and in a way that Billy Vunipola's comments weren't, fulsome clarification of his position on it. And Simon Zebo was involved as well afterwards, and I don't know if we've got a screen grab of that, but liar, liar, pants on fire was the response from Simon Zebo. That I mean, if I was Bundy Aki, I'm thinking I've just pulled off a pretty decent PR coup here, and I've brought some great clarification to it, and now my former teammate has put me right back under the bus again. He did have a sort of laughing emoji afterward. I don't know if that meant that this is just banter, or actually
it was high stakes banter.
Yeah. So I don't know. hopefully that isn't the full stop on the conversation, that actually it's just the start of it and we begin to hear much more of this. But the idea of sports people being representative of anything other than, like Padraig Harrington often talks about, listen, I just go out and I stick the ball in the hole, and like if you place any value on my thoughts on anything, I'm happy to tell you about them, but if you place any value on that, that's on you.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a bit of a emotional tug about this one, because I grew up adoring Muhammad Ali, and I liked that he spoke out on social issues. But Muhammad Ali seemed to be coming from a place of love in so many of the issues he spoke about. But this stuff, I don't know how it hasn't been banned. Players aren't allowed to make overtly political statements on a football pitch, for instance. But blessing yourself, that's all allowed. And it's kind of. I've always been surprised that they haven't moved. Well, not really surprised, but I mean, I do think they should move on it and say, look, it's bless yourself in the dressing room before you go out, if that's your thing, or honour whatever God you believe in. But I don't see how it's any different to Robbie Fowler pulling up a shirt and showing his support for the Dockers, for instance. But it's appalling. The other thing I thought when I heard the Folau thing, when I saw the checklist of people who were going to his idea of hell and his idea of heaven, the hell one, I was kind of thinking, when I was a kid, that was mainstream Catholic thinking.
We're all going to hell.
Protestants would have been on the list as well. There was quite. It was they're going to hell. They're going to hell. They're going to. But it's just utterly bizarre.
It is, and it's like, I don't know, it's pretty pervasive as well, isn't it? Like it's everywhere. The thanking whoever your God is post whatever it is you've done on a sporting field is just, it's such accepted norm now that it doesn't get challenged. It's just like
I mean, look, I'm coming at it from the point of view of an atheist. I don't believe in any of this stuff. So when I see him talking about who's going to hell, I mean, I chuckle at that as well. The idea that he thinks there's a heaven and a hell. But I mean, I just think it's appalling stuff, and anyone who defends that, deserves anything that comes their way.
Book 19.
Yes, I just finished the. It started out as a trilogy many years ago, back in the year 2000, and now I'm on book 19.
The longest trilogy of all time.
It's So I finished it. Yeah, I mean, it is.
Does it get like? Is there just such a wealth of hilarity and detail and depth to the characters that it doesn't become difficult to do it, or is
it's always difficult? I mean, the 5:30 starts actually get. I'm a middle-aged man now. I'm starting to feel them. Like I don't roll out of bed and sing, June is bursting out all over. Like I really do feel that, and so it does get harder, definitely, as you get older. But I still enjoy it. Like I still get a huge kick out of writing the books, and I'm just grateful that all these years later that the Ross O'Carroll Kelly still has an audience, that people still want to follow his life and misadventures. And he's an old man like me as well now, so he's kind of looking back on his life, saying, if I'd done things differently. He's got that sort of sliding doors thing with Brian O'Driscoll, that they were both in the same UCD sports management course together in 2000, and Brian went to the gym and Ross went to the bar, and that's the moment. Like that's your Gwyneth Paltrow moment.
Only for that moment.
But he sees his future as a sort of mentor now, as a coach. So he's moving in the next book. He's moving more into the coaching side of things.
All right.
So that's all I can tell you.
Is there watch the space? When is it due out, by the way?
It's the first week in September. Okay, the 6th of September.
Okay. Do you find there's a typical audience for it, or is it?
It used to
people
be
moved with you that journey?
Yeah, and actually the audience has definitely changed. I mean, I used to go to UCD to do events, reading events, and kind of question and answer events, and people would bring books for me to sign and say, I've been reading it for the last 2 years or whatever. Now they come to me and say, my dad is a big fan, or my mum is a big fan. I have an audience who are my age now, who've kind of grown up with Ross, but also. a lot more women are reading it, and I think that since I started writing for the Irish Times magazine, it's kind of introduced what I would call the Avoca Handweavers moms, who in the early days would have been appalled to read the early Ross books. Hey, this is what my son is laughing at. They're now buying the books. The sort of Foxrock Golf Club moms and the Avoca Handweaver moms. So there's a new audience there as well, which I find unusual, because the people who are reading me are the people I wanted to infuriate when I started writing Ross. I really wanted them to hate this, you know.
I mean, are you still enjoying it, I suppose?
Yeah, I do. I really, I get a kick out of it, you know.
And so there's the trilogy could run for some time yet, almost.
There's definitely another book, and because I've actually started on the book that will be coming out in 2020. But I take it one book at a time, and if I'm enjoying what I'm doing, I say, I'll go for another year.
Yeah. You've been in sports journalism too long with that sort of just one game at a time approach.
Exactly.
Well, listen, and the musical obviously is upcoming as well. And people
Coppers, we're back in rehearsals in 4 weeks' time for Copperface Jacks the musical. And so we had a great run last year. The last 2.5 weeks were completely sold out. There wasn't a ticket to be got anywhere. And we'd really fun nights in the theatre. The last night the Dublin team came in, and they really enjoyed it.
Did they?
Yeah. So it's a send-up of that sort of Kerry Dublin rivalry, you know.
And are you leaning on any of those characters specifically that are in? Are some of that team looking up, going?
One or two of them told me afterwards that they recognised themselves in it. Yeah.
Who?
I can't tell you. It wouldn't be fair. Because when they said it. They may not have been happy about it.
Okay. Well, that's again a good sign of success. Continued success.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant series. I haven't been to Coppers yet. I've been to the Ross Carl Kelly musical, so I must.
Okay. Well, come in and see Coppers.
Are you on stage? Sort of. How involved are you in terms of putting that?
No. I mean, I wrote the play. I wrote the musical. I wrote the lyrics to the songs, and I did. The music was written by Paul Woodfull and David McCune, so I was involved in the composition side of things, and I wrote the script.
And you stand back then?
And I stand back. And I found, as a writer, I found this with the Ross plays as well, if the writer's in the room watching the actors, they don't experiment. They tend to play it straight by the book. And if you disappear from the room, great things happen, because they try things.
Though? Is that
not really. I mean, not really, because anything that goes right that happens in the room, I can claim credit for. I'd say, I remember when I wrote that.
And if it's shit, you're like,
I didn't write that. Nothing to do with me. So you have that plausible deniability. You can always say I wasn't there. But no, it is. We've got a really, really talented cast. Johnny Ward, Rosanna Purcell, just really, really brilliant comic actors. And what they've done, I gave them a script, and the script is an idea. And I didn't go into the rehearsal room for about 4 days. Carl Harper, the director, did everything. And when I saw what they'd done with what I wrote, I was just blown away. All the little ideas, they're the things that happen when you don't have the writer in the room. They try things out, and that's the magic of it.
Good. I presume the details will be on your social media pages, and
I think the tickets are on Ticketmaster already. So we've got a 5-week run in high summer. So I think it's the middle of July till the middle of August.
Ticketmaster.ie and at aka Paul Howard, if I'm right, on Twitter.
That's right, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Paul, absolute pleasure having you in this morning.
Likewise, Adrian, really enjoyed it.
Brilliant morning, well spent. Reminder that we've a very special Saturday panel coming your way this week. Mentioned a bit earlier. Joined by Richie Oakley, Verona Murphy and Shane Coleman. All with thanks to WeLoveCycling.ie, who are powered by Skoda. We're going to be discussing recreational cycling, the rise in popularity, safety issues, and the pros and cons of getting out and about on two wheels, and also on off the ball over the course of the weekend. On Saturday, Crystal Palace against Everton, the feature game on Premier League Live with Sky Sports. That's on Today FM. Ian Beach and Brian Kerr are going to be on duty for that game. You can also hear live online commentary of Spurs against Bournemouth from 12:15. That's over on todayfm.com/PLL. Adam Lindsay, Gary Breen in the commentary box for that game. And then on Sunday on Off the Ball and News Talk, Burnley against Man City at 2:05. Dave McIntyre and Brian Kerr, who's a busy man this weekend for us, is going to be on United against Chelsea from 4:30. Vincent Hogan and Marie Crowe will review the Sunday newspapers on Off the Ball from 1 o'clock as well. And from 7 o'clock tonight, Ruby Walsh and Robbie Power are going to be previewing the Punchestown Festival. So that's pretty much it from us for this morning. Liverpool fans, we've got all your entries for that new 1920 Bob Paisley inspired home kit. We're going to reveal the winner around about lunchtime on Twitter, and if you miss out, you can pre-order the jersey online or at the official LFC store in the Ilex Centre in Dublin ahead of its release. That's on May the 9th. That's it from us for the morning. OTB AM back on Monday from 7:45 from me. For now, good luck.